Good morning, students. Welcome you all to the English class. Today, in this video, we are going to learn the second poem from our text. The name of the poem is The Cold Within, written by James Patrick Kinney. Before I start explaining the poem, let me brief you about the poet. James Patrick Kinney is an Irish poet. He uses his poetic parable, The Cold Within, to illustrate the folly of falling prey to discrimination that shortchanges our own humanity. The poem has been written in the 1960s during the African American Civil Rights Movement. Kinney was outraged by inhuman discriminatory attitudes during this time. He focused on the issue that many a times we act unwisely and do not rise above our egos. That is, we act in a prejudiced way. The poem, The Cold Within, sends out a message, and the message is relevant even today. When we face spatially the divisive outlooks in the world, and this divisive outlook, students, lead us to violence and hatred among us. The poem has an egalitarian view, and that reminds us to overcome our personal demons and be wise enough to consider everybody worthy and equal. The poem consists of 8 quatrains, 4 lines per stanza, and the rhyme scheme is ABCB. Kinney does not preach. Instead, he asks reader to draw the inference from the visual imagery. Now students, there are visual imageries in this poem. We will discuss what are they, where are they in my following lectures. Now let's come to the poem. Now student, this poem is a parable. We need to understand what is called a parable. Parable is a figure of speech which presents a short story, typically with a moral lesson at the end. Like analogy, we find the use of parables in verse and prose, specifically in religious texts such as the Upanishads or the Bible. Parables are often used to explore ethical concepts in spiritual texts. Parables have human characters. The parable is related to figures of speech such as the metaphor and the simile, but it should not be identified with metaphor and simile. A parable is like a metaphor in that it uses concrete phenomena to illustrate abstract ideas. Now, so far this poem is concerned, The Cold Within. This is a poem, very simple students. The poem talks about 6 people sitting around a dying fire. The poem has a profound moral effect. That is why it is a parable. The poem talks about breaking the social barriers of caste, class, race, and religion, and uphold the virtue of universal brotherhood. The poem gives us a clear understanding about the sinful acts like anger, envy, prejudice, miserliness, and materialistic attitudes. Now, these are some sinful acts which are adopted by human beings on this earth. The poem is set in the western part of Cincinnati, Ohio. This is a place where the blacks faced the racial discrimination to the most during the years of 1960s. Now, let me brief you about the background of the poem. The poem says that there were 6 men who were sitting around a fire in a dying cold weather. Each of them was having their logs in their hands, rather stick of woods. Because of some prejudice, they were unable to give up their stick of woods in order to strengthen the fire, which could have saved them from the biting cold. Finally, the fire lost its strength and died out. Thus, all of those 6 men froze to death, clutching their stick of woods tightly in their hands. Now, students, let us start explaining the poem. And over here we find that the poet is saying at the onset, 6 humans trapped by happenstance in bleak and bitter cold. Each one possessed a stick of wood, or so the stories told. The poem begins with a dramatic note. Without meandering much, the poet straightaway takes us to the situation amidst the happenstance. Weather was bitterly cold. Each of them were holding stick of wood in their hands. Here poet used the word humans. Notice, just pay attention student, in the first line it is written humans. Now here poet used the word humans instead of people or men or women. This is because humans are attributed with the same qualities in the eyes of the Creator. The universal power has arranged the situation of bringing the 6 men together. Next, their dying fire in need of logs, but the first one held hers back, for of the faces round the fire she noticed one was black. The woman who was there could not overcome the act of committing the sin of racial prejudice. She could have given her log when she saw that the fire was dying out in want of fuel, that is, the log. If she couldn't have seen the man as black in color, she would have given her log in benefit of others. But because of her racial prejudice, she held her log, or she held her stick of wood back.